Let's talk about how to be happy. So, I feel stilted. Oh, it's so tricky. That elusive thing that we all want. So I want to talk about happiness today, but I'm not really sure where to start because happiness is such a counterintuitive and twisted topic. And to the extent that I think most of us don't even think that it's possible to change our happiness. Instead, we tend to think about how to get rid of our problems and how to fix stuff about ourselves and about life, rather than really go for gold, which is simply being happy. And the trickiest thing about being happy, the most twisted and counterintuitive thing about it, is that you really can't get it from something, at least not in a lasting and meaningful way. You can't trick yourself into being happy. The only way to be happy is to be happy now with exactly who you are and what your life is and what your experience is right now. The way to do this is by being yourself fully, so without holding back, suppressing, or denying who you are, being fully yourself, and by accepting your life and all of your circumstances, which is kind of the same as being yourself. Really being yourself without, and being your whole experience in a sense, so not denying anything about your life, not suppressing or avoiding or making wrong, judging anything about your life circumstances. So really accepting your life circumstances as they are. And the magic thing that happens is when you let go of all these expectations and thoughts and judgments and hold back suppressions, ways of denying yourself and reality, and you kind of come to terms with and align with what your experience really is and who you really are in your most authentic and genuine view of yourself, happiness just magically appears from that. You'll just have it. And the reason is because happiness is a natural, authentic state of being. Just like curiosity, joy, playfulness, and all the kind of higher emotional states, although happiness isn't limited to any of the higher emotional states or any of the positive emotional states. You can be happy and have anxiety. That's possible. Really, when I talk about happiness, it's about a real deep connection with yourself, being fully yourself, and a real deep connection with your life, so fully accepting your life. If you do that, you'll be connected with this aliveness, this sense of aliveness, which is to say that life will feel very rich, deep, and meaningful, and you'll feel happy in it, and you'll feel happy in yourself. And you won't need anything or anyone to have that happiness, to have that experience, because it will be your experience. And then anything that you do have, any circumstances or others, relationships with other people, with things, whatever it is in your life, if you have those connections, then those will only add to your happiness, and you can be fully happy with or without those things, or people, relationships, or connections. So really, happiness is an experience you can have right now. And in fact, that's all it ever was. If you ever felt happy because you achieved something, now this might be a bit controversial, right? If you ever felt happy because you achieved something, you got something that you thought you wanted, and you got a hit from that, a euphoria from that. That was actually, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but that was you manipulating yourself to get an experience. So all that driving and anxiety and frustration that you generated to get that achievement or that thing or that just whatever you wanted, that happiness, it's temporary. It's more of a relief. And it comes from pushing yourself to get something, and then the relief that comes with getting it. And sometimes a euphoria comes with that even. But that kind of happiness, it's relative and it's subject to a hedonic treadmill. So if you're getting things in your life, if you're achieving things or, getting stuff, whatever it is, you're going to adjust to what it is you're getting. You get that promotion at work, or if you get into that relationship that you wanted to, what's going to happen is that you're going to adjust without other changes to yourself, like intrinsic, deep changes to how you experience and connect with yourself and with your life. No matter what circumstances we throw at you, you're going to adjust and lower to your same baseline of happiness. Because happiness is an experience and you can have it at any moment. And if you have it because you pushed yourself to get to it, really you were manipulating your emotions, manipulating yourself to get something you thought you wanted. When really what you got at the end was just an experience that you could have had at the beginning. You could have just felt happy now. You didn't have to wait to get something to feel happy. But you withheld that happiness from yourself because you thought that you needed to get something to have it. Now that sounds crazy. Why would anyone do this? Well, because feeling happy in and of itself and not needing anything isn't so good for your survival. It's not so good for your self-identity. Because if you take away all the manipulation and all the trying to control and all the strategies to get stuff, then you're not going to pursue the things that might make it more likely you survive, both physically and socially. So because of that, there's no incentive for you to feel happy right now. And what's worse, the culture that you're in doesn't value being happy. It values getting stuff and achieving things. There's nothing wrong with achieving things, and there's nothing wrong with getting stuff. But when we value that above all else, then what that creates is this incessant pressure and anxiety to get more and more and more stuff. And then we forget in that actually we had to create that pressure to push ourselves to get something we thought we wanted, but we could have just been happy right now. Another painful thing about this is that you might believe what I'm saying, or you might doubt what I'm saying, but what I guarantee will happen is if that you push yourself to get something that you think you want, what's going to happen inevitably is that when you get it, you'll adjust to it, and then there'll be another thing that you want to get that you think will do the trick. This is it's a cliche. It's a cliche of the successful person who just goes for it and gets what they want, achieves something big, and is no more happy. In fact, often they get less happy because they get disconnected from themselves and they get disconnected from others. They become less happy. It's a cliche, the successful, miserable person. But we kind of conveniently discount that and still pursue success and achievement because it's what our society idealizes and role models. So we just go for that. So what I'm getting at here is that it's possible, and in fact, not only is it possible, the only way of really being happy is to be happy now, right now, and to let go of all these expectations and thoughts about how to be happy in the future. Because you can only be happy now, and it's an experience that if you take away all of the striving, you just get it naturally. You're born with it. You don't have to do anything or achieve anything to be happy. This is ridiculous that you would need to do that. And it's a cliche. It's obvious, and yet we don't seem to embody, as a society, we don't seem to embody this at all. In fact, we often just dismiss it or say, yeah, we know that. And then we don't embody it and take it on as a practice in our lives. Can I be more happy with what I have right now, with myself right now, and with all my circumstances? Or am I generating problems and ideals about how I want my life to be, and then creating anxiety and pressure that I'm not living up to those ideals? Sound familiar? No matter what it is, you can always keep doing that. It's something you're doing. You have to actually create or have a thought, put it in the future, and then you have to live with one foot in the future in that thought and one foot in the present. And so you can never be fully present with what's happening now. And you can never really be happy because you're constantly chasing a thought and generating an emotion, an anxiety to get somewhere you think you want to go. And I'm speaking for myself here, of course, also. So what can we do about this? What are some things we can do to actually be happy right now? What are some simple practices we can take on to feel more connected with ourselves? The first one that comes to mind is to slow down. Just pause. When you notice you're caught in this rat race, just pause and just notice your breathing. Notice that you're here right now. Notice that you have a mind, you have a body, you have sensations, you have an experience of yourself. And just notice that. And notice if you're generating this drive. And can you feel that in your body? And can you slow down? Can you really just be with that and maybe let go of that, or accept that you're doing that at least? That would be one step in the right direction. The direction of being happy now would be to accept or release anything that you're doing that's stopping you being happy now. And in order to do this, you need a second component. And perhaps this should really come first, which is you need to actually commit to being happy. Like, you have to set an intention that actually you want to be happy, and that that's more important to you, like actually enjoying your life, your experience. That's more important to you than getting something, or even how you look to other people. So your social survival now is at stake. You'd have to commit to being happy before that. So happiness comes first. And if you really commit to that and set that as your intention, then you'll be happy. It's actually really simple. It is very difficult because we really want to survive. We can't really have happiness even if we're not alive to experience it. It's just this survival stuff we do way more than is necessary. Like, we don't need to do as much as we're doing. We don't need to identify with all these things and all these wants we have. It's possible to be happy with just a very simple experience of ourselves. We don't need all this stuff to be happy. Another thing we can do is to focus on the process rather than the goal. If we set ourselves a goal, this can be very useful. A goal of doing something, or moving towards something. Now, what we tend to do is set goals in the future, and then we rush as fast as we can to get to the goal and don't really enjoy the process of it. Instead, we can focus on the process, which is to say, rather than setting these goals to get something that we think we want, we can still use goals, but we can use goals more as a opportunity to have or create a process to get to that goal, where the process involves learning about ourselves, connecting more deeply with ourselves, and becoming happy in the process. If you're in a process of moving towards something, you can really slow down, and of course, if you're committed to being happy, you can engage in this process of working towards your goal. And as obstacles come up in your experience, as resistance comes up, as maybe old traumas, old wounds, or limiting beliefs about yourself come up, you can start to let those go. And you can use the goal as a way of exploring and deepening your own understanding of yourself. And that's the reason to learn more about life. And that's the reason to have the goal, not to get something. That's another thing you can do. Now, I will say on that point, it's more challenging when you set yourself a goal and have this commitment of being happy than it is if you simply focus on being happy. If you focus entirely on being happy, it tends to be, in my experience, more accessible initially than if you have goals and try and get stuff. That's because the goals come wrapped up, the goals that we set come wrapped up with all these conditions, all this conditioning we have, all this anxiety. But that's not to say we should ditch goals altogether, but that having the goal can be much more about the process. And it's actually a way for us to deepen our happiness and deepen our connection with ourselves. It's really useful. I don't think we should ditch goals or ditching achieving things, but rather it's just a question of commitment, really committing to being happy. So are there other things we can do? Apart from be really present, really committed to being happy. I think noticing how we're feeling is very useful. When we get caught in some kind of story or some kind of anxiety about the future, if we notice that and we're going slow, we have the opportunity to be with that more deeply, connect with ourselves more deeply. And we usually do that by being curious about what we're experiencing. And every kind of meditation or contemplative practice, which is another thing that's very useful, is to have lots of practices, or at least practices that really work for you, will really help to being happy. You have a meditation practice or journaling, contemplation. For me, one of my main practices is making these videos and talking to myself about my own experience. This is a way I can connect with myself more and make myself feel more expanded and alive and puts me in touch with myself. This is one of my practices, but any practice that works for you, breath work is another one. Anything that works for you, you can lean on that and use that as a vehicle, because ultimately you want everything you do to be your practice, every experience you have to be an opportunity to practice and to connect with yourself. But to start with, it's useful to have one practice to focus on where you do that, or at least maybe one practice or even a few practices. And then another thing we can do is just simply do less things. Often when we try and do a lot of stuff, it's very hard. We're not very focused on really enjoying, slowing down, committing to what we're doing right now. But if we do fewer things and have fewer goals, fewer things that we take on, it's much easier to connect with our experience and to go slow. And so happiness is more accessible. Now, when you start doing this, maybe you don't instantly feel really happy. Be careful of not setting expectations about how this should look. The trick is to always just come back to noticing what's happening right now. I mean, really right now in this moment as you're watching this. What are you experiencing? Do you have any thoughts or expectations? If you do, you can let them go and you'll feel a bit more free, a bit more connected with yourself. So you can do that. And in other videos, I talk about that. Like that's very possible to do. And a very simple practice. Now I say simple, it doesn't mean it's easy. And it's harder because we don't do it in our culture. But it's possible to do it. And through doing these things, of course, I'm continuing to learn every day. But through doing these things, I've found that my baseline of happiness has changed over the years. Now feel it's much more accessible And there's much less stuff in the way that I thought I needed. And actually, really, I can be happy with very little. And when I do have things happen that I want, I can really appreciate them and be really involved with my life, whatever happens. Final word I'll say about this is to do your best to let go of your certainty and scripts or beliefs you have about how you experience life. If you have a view that life looks a certain way, like you can't feel happy just as you are, because you have some kind of belief system or view that life shouldn't be that way, at least in part, that's the reason. You have to have a certain kind of openness that actually you can experience more is available to you than you may have been taught or may appear on the surface. For example, to be able to change your experience at any moment, have a different emotional, felt experience. It's actually possible to change your experience on a dime. That's something you can train, something you can do. And it's also possible to let go on a dime of limiting beliefs and assumptions about yourself and expectations that you have and judgments and so on. You can actually let those go. That's something you can practice. That is possible. But if you have a view or like a certainty that you can't do that because you've never done it before, or it seems like you've got all these beliefs like your mind is out of your control and you've got a monkey mind, and so all you can do is like observe your thoughts. You don't actually have the power to change your thinking, for example. You may have any one of many belief systems that might disempower you from actually connecting with yourself and feeling happy right now. But ultimately, the trick is to just let go of all of those. So it's kind of a catch-22 because you've got to let go of that stuff. In order to let go of more stuff, you have to let go of the idea that you can't let go of things. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but it is possible. In fact, we can do a lot more. We have a lot more agency than would appear on the surface. And certainly more than our culture believes we have. And certainly we can see from the beginning, from when I started talking about this, clearly our culture doesn't have the best view of happiness. This is fairly obvious because almost no one is happy. So clearly your culture does not have a complete handle on what's possible. I'm just saying what I've discovered for myself and that you can discover for yourself. I'm going to leave it there. Wishing you all the most joy and happiness, and I hope this was useful. Take care and see you on the next one.